Okay. Okay, so anyway, okay, today's class, as I mentioned before, okay, this is on instrumentation. Okay, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times before as well. When we say instrument, it doesn't necessarily mean devices. Okay, if your study relates to you're doing interviews, for example, there are instrumentation there because you need to develop your interview questions. Okay, you cannot just simply ask whatever it is that you want to ask. There must be a structured way that you plan. Okay, during your research methodology stage, you have to plan. Okay, whatever that you're going to do. Okay, if you're doing interview, then the questions must be specified. It must be very specific to what you are going to study. Same thing if you're doing survey. Yeah, I know a lot of you, maybe not a lot, maybe some of you are thinking of doing survey for your FYP. And with survey, the instrumentation is the questionnaire. Okay, questionnaire, you have to develop that based on specific ways to develop a survey. Okay, you cannot just simply list all of the questions that you think, oh, this might be relevant. Okay, and you might also miss some questions which you think are not relevant, but is actually relevant. Okay, there are a lot of things there that you have to consider. And so we will proceed with the class now. Okay. So very quickly, a recap on the differences between quantitative and qualitative approach. Okay, but basically what is the difference? It's only three things. So how the data is collected, okay, how it was analyzed, and then how you want to communicate the findings. It doesn't matter if you do qualitative or you do quantitative. Okay, these three are the things that differentiate the two. Okay. So be very sure about what you're going to do. Okay, because based on the poll before, a majority of you guys are going to proceed with qualitative research. Okay. Still, you still have to think about how you want to collect the data, okay, how you're going to analyze it, and how you want to communicate the findings. So it's all similar. Okay, the key scope is similar. It's just how you proceed with it is different. Okay, so instrumentation. The instruments and procedures used in collecting data is called instrumentation. So key word here is collecting data. It doesn't matter, like I mentioned before. If you're using a device, you're using an equipment, using a sensor, that is instruments. But if you are conducting an interview, your interview questions are your instrument. Okay, so whatever you use for collecting your data is called instrument. Okay. So highlight that in your methodology. You have to be very sure what you are going to use to collect your data. Okay. And then when you think about instrumentation, again, the same thing. Okay, what are the procedures? Okay, what are the conditions? Okay. Have to be very careful. You have to think about where you want to collect the data. Okay. When? Okay. How often are the data to be collected? So these are some of the questions. It's not limited only to this. Okay, but this should help you. You have to ask yourself. Okay, when you are you want to do qualitative, or let's just go with that. You want to do qualitative study, and you decided on a interview. Okay, maybe you want to look at the enforcement of garbage disposal. Okay. So you develop your instrument, which is your interview questions. Okay, And during the planning stage, remember, the research proposal is where you do your planning. Okay? You have to think where you want to collect this data. Okay, so thinking about disposal, so maybe you want to collect data from PBT, for example, from the local authorities. Okay, so when you think about that, then you have to start thinking which local government are you targeting? Okay, which agency, for example, if you're going for those in Malaysia, you want to do SW Corp, for example. Okay? You have to think about that. Okay, when you want to collect the data, you have to start thinking, okay, my FYP is going to be around this month until this month, but my data collection should be when? Okay, you have to start thinking about that. And this is where your Gantt chart is very helpful. Okay, because you are planning, you have to think about what are the activities that you're going to do, okay, when you have to complete each of the activity. Okay, for example, data collection, you have to complete at one certain point, okay, before you can do the data analysis. So you cannot do data collection until the end of your FYP. You cannot, because you need time to analyze the data. Yeah. So not only that, when you do your FYP, you have to think about writing. You have to come up with your thesis. Yeah, that thesis, you need time. You need time to write. So you have to, my tips was always to look at this in backwards. Okay, you have to start to think about when is the end date. Okay, when is your end date and what you have to submit by then. So maybe your thesis submission, and then maybe you need 1 month to write. 1 month. So let's say end here is June. Let's just put it there, yeah. Okay, so you need 1 month, so this should be May. Okay, and you need some other activities here, maybe your data analysis, 2 months, for example. So you know you can work backwards like that. So you can actually know how much time you have to complete a certain activity. Okay, and this relates to here as well, how often the data to be collected. Can sometimes if you do an interview, okay, and you want to look at the differences in time. Okay, so it might be that you need to interview the same people 2 times. Okay, so you have to work that out into your schedule. Okay, about the data collection, when you have to go, okay, who is going to be there. Yeah. So the most highly regarded types of instruments can provide useless data. Okay. So even if you have the best kind of instrument, okay, it can provide useless data. Why? Because it is administered incorrectly, for example. Or maybe you get the response that you get are actually biased response. Yeah. So the condition sometimes, yeah, if you do an interview just now, and the situation actually is not conducive for an interview, maybe during that time it's very, very busy, for example. Okay, so the results that you get might be biased. Okay, so on and so forth. So there could be many different factors that affect your data collection. So bear that in mind. You start thinking about who is your population that you're targeting, okay? And start thinking about when is the right time to approach. Okay, so major approaches to gathering information or data. Yeah, when starting a research study, you need to collect the required information. okay, required information. But sometimes the information is already available and only needs to be extracted. So if it's the blue one, okay, if it's something that is not out there, okay, no one has ever studied the things that you want to study, okay, and you need to collect it yourself. So that is primary data. But if it's already available and only needs to be extracted, okay, it is secondary data. I think I've already mentioned this as well during the previous lectures. Okay, the differences between primary and secondary data. So bear that in mind, and really think about in your study, which of these is your target. Okay. So of course, some of the, this is a simplified diagram. Yeah. So if you do primary sources, so these are some of the ways for you to collect the data. So it can be experiment, okay, refreshing back experimental study that we learned, I think 3 weeks ago. Okay, that is based on experiment. It can be simulation. Okay, simulation is also considered primary source. Okay, but this is maybe not related. I mean, some of you might do things in terms of simulation. Okay, but you know, this will relate to modeling, so on and so forth. But if you're using only a application, okay, or you are using specific softwares, okay, it can also be considered as simulation, and it is primary sources. It can be observation, and when we say observation, rewind back, okay, when we learned before about quasi-experimental. So it can be participant or non-participant. Okay, participant is when you, okay, as the observer, okay, you are also there with your subjects. Okay, and non-participant is where you are outside. You are just observing, okay, what is happening. You are not inserting yourself in the situation. Okay, that is participant and non-participant. We have interviewing. Okay, and when we do interview, okay, it can be categorized into two. Okay, first is structured, second is unstructured. Okay, so what is that? Is actually related to the questions that you ask. Okay, in structured interview, you already have specific questions that you are asking your subject. Okay, maybe you have a list of questions, you have maybe 10 questions. Oh God. Yeah, so that is called a structured because you already have this specific 10 questions and you follow the order of which it was asked. Okay. Whereas for unstructured, okay, this is free flow. You are just interviewing people. Maybe you are talking very casually with people. Okay, and however, you have your own thought process behind. So it cannot be, okay, remember this is a research, yeah? So if any of you are thinking of doing unstructured interview, okay, it's not simply just you borak-borak. Okay? It's not just about you talking with your friends and then talking back and forth, those kind of things. Okay, remember it's a research, so there must be specific things that you are looking for. Okay, but if you Google this, yeah, unstructured interview is one of the hardest. Okay, it's the one who are interviewing has to be very, very experienced because you need to be very critical. You have to think quickly. Okay, what is it that you want to ask? What are the specific aims of that interview? Okay, which is why usually people go for structured. Because in structured, you already have the questions. These questions has already been validated by experts. Okay, validated by experts. So you are sure that whatever response that you get, okay, is following the specific things that you aim for. Okay, and of course, last one we have questionnaire. Okay, this might not be quite relevant anymore. Okay, we used to have mail questionnaire. Okay, I know that nowadays people are just, you know, a lot of you are exposed to online questionnaire. Okay. Remember, I don't know how many of you guys use Cellcom mobile for your mobile phone. Anyone use Cellcom? I don't know about other, you know, mobile operators because I use Cellcom. But in Cellcom, we have this app called Cellcom Live. Yeah, anyone? Ada tak?
Ada, Doktor.
Cellcom?
I'm using
Kan?
Cellcom.
Okay, so kalau for those who are using Cellcom, we have that app, right? So when you reload, bila reload, and then there's always this question kan at the end. How is your experience with Cellcom Live, for example? Okay, there's a lot of these questions coming, like for example for this one lah. But of course, nowadays we have all kinds of apps in our phone. Okay. Remember, sometimes it's kind of annoying. Okay, sometimes it pop up. Okay, please rate this app. Yeah, you like this app or not? Okay, those kind of things are actually questionnaire. Okay, it's not in the form of 20 or 50 questions we have to fill up. It's very, very short, but it gives the companies a direct feedback on their customers. Right? So just to give you an example, because sometimes we start thinking about this in too academically. Okay, what is it lah? Mail questionnaire lah, collective questionnaire. So it's out there, it's around you. Okay, and there are things that you can use. Okay, for example, if you decide to do questionnaire for your FYP, okay, there's resources out there. A lot of questions out there, a lot of questionnaires that you can use to develop your own. Okay, of course, that is on primary sources. We also have secondary sources, and secondary sources, for example, if you're using documents, if you're thinking about doing something on the historical concept, yeah, something that looks at specific things over a period of time, and you have documents in terms of government publications, you have census, so on and so forth. So that is called a secondary source. Okay. So research can be done using secondary sources. That's no problem. Okay, but you have to be very careful and you have to be very critical on what are the data that you're using, where it comes from. Okay. Is it good data? Okay. Is it bad data? How do we distinguish good and bad? So there are ways to do that. Okay, for example, last time, for those who asked me about SLR, maybe we won't have this option for this year, but your seniors, okay, because of COVID and because of online learning, they have the option to do their thesis with SLR option. So SLR is systematic literature review. So in SLR, the data that they use actually comes from all of this. Okay, they scour the internet for previous journals, previous publications, books, government data, statistics. Okay, in Malaysia, we have DOSM, okay, Department of Statistics Malaysia. And there's a lot of data that you can use from there. Okay, for those who are thinking about doing climate-related stuff, you might be interested to look into Met Malaysia databases, so on and so forth. There's a lot of resources out there that you can use as your data source. Right. So very quickly on this, okay, just to show you the differences. So if it's an experiment, okay, experimental method plan, okay, your instrumentation and materials should be about the instruments. Okay. Oh, by the way, this is on methodology. So, am I methodology? Okay. So remember in your in your research proposal, the final report, you have to include the methodology. Okay. So be very, you have to look at this one. Okay. So if it's an experimental method, okay, you have to have things like, you have to discuss the instruments that you're using. Okay, how it was developed, the items. So this is specifically on items and scales. Okay, reliability, validity, has it ever been used before? Okay, if you're using an instrument, if you're using a device, okay, has that device been used in similar studies before? Okay, that should be in your methodology. And then the procedure, okay, before is on the materials and on the instrumentation, and then you have to discuss the procedure. Okay. What is the type? Okay. Are you doing any type of comparisons? Okay. Is there any modeling or model involved? Okay, all of that should be in your methodology. Okay. So I'm not saying if you're doing experimental, you have to include all of these, yeah. Type of experiment should be there, but sometimes comparison. Maybe you're not doing something like this one. Okay, so you don't have to put this into your methodology. Maybe you're not doing modeling. Yeah, so you don't have to include this in your methodology as well. So this is an example. Okay, so don't, later on when you do your methodology part, okay, don't just simply look at this and write. You have to think about what is your method. Okay, what is your specific method? Okay, not others, right? So comparing that with a survey method, again, it's talking about instrumentation, which is similar to before. Okay. However, now the instrument is not a device, it's not an equipment, it's actually the survey instrument. So you have to talk about how you develop this survey. Okay. How you do your pilot testing. Right? What are the items? Items here is the question. So this one. So in the questionnaire, there's usually some type of questions or things that you want people to rate. So those are your items. Okay. And then what are the types of scores? Okay, is it yes or no question? Is it you have to rate 1 to 5? So you have to talk about that. Okay. And then of course, whenever you do that type of things, you have to describe the validity and reliability. Okay. Of course, maybe you might say like, I haven't done that. How could I talk about the validity and reliability? Okay, first to start off, you need to see the past or current users of the instrument. Okay, maybe some people are using survey instrument as well, who are studying something related to your topic. Okay? So you can actually use that and put that in your methodology. You say that, okay, this paper, this reference, okay, XX 2018, okay, use this type of survey instrument, okay, to study blah, blah, blah. Okay? And it is the validity and reliability scores are such and such. Okay? So you have to refer back to the specific references who are using that type of instrument. Okay? Usually they will report their validity and reliability. Okay? And that becomes the basis for yours. Okay? When you develop your own, then you have to also calculate your own validity and reliability. Okay. So next, what is validity? What is reliability? Okay. And in addition, objectivity. Okay. So validity is actually, you are saying that your instrument, okay, is measuring what it is supposed to measure. Okay, it's a bit different than reliability, okay, because when we talk about reliability, it's about consistency. Okay? So valid, okay, just think about the root word here. Okay, here is valid, and here is reliable. So you want your instruments, okay, to be valid. Okay, when we say valid, is that whatever that you get from your instrument, the data that you get, okay, it's actually the results that you are targeting. It's not actually measuring some other things. Okay. An easy example, okay, just a question. Okay, what is, okay, so maybe you in your survey, okay, very simple question. Okay, you are thinking, I want to find out the height of the people in my class. Okay, so there's 49 of you, okay, and you, one of you. Okay, let me just pick a name. Jenny. Sorry, because your name is right under mine. So Jenny, she wants to think about, okay, I want to find out what is the height of my friends. Okay, so when we say valid, okay, the question should be, what is your height? Okay, might seem very straightforward, but you know, because this is a very simple example, things become more complicated as you go to try to measure a more abstract thing. Okay, so height, what is your height? Then you, so this is your instrument, this is your question. So the result you get is, okay, maybe Ammar, Ammar Izan bagi height dia. What is your height? Ada tak? Ammar Izan, I'm just.
Sorry, Doktor.
What is your height?
169, Doktor.
169. Okay, 169,
Yep.
Alright. So Ammar Izan bagi 169. Okay, tiba-tiba Azira somehow tersilap baca question. She misread the question and she thought you are asking what is your weight. And Azira gave her weight in, I won't ask you, don't worry, because weight is a very sensitive question. So somehow you get the data, one of the data from the 49 answers that you get, okay, you might not get all height. You get one, a very different one. Okay, and this happens, guys. This happens because you are not, especially when you're doing online questionnaire. Okay, you are not there, okay, to guide people. This is a very simple question, but imagine if you have something very complicated. Okay, maybe you are asking people about what do you think about climate change? Yeah, so people might not even know what climate change is. Maybe we don't know, right? So when they don't know something, the answer that they will give is different. Okay, maybe it's like totally out. Yeah, it's not related at all to what you are asking. So that might happen, which is why when we develop the instrument, okay, there are procedures. Okay, there are steps that you have to go with because you want to avoid this kind of situation. You don't want to cause confusion to your samples, to your respondents. Okay, so valid. Okay, so with Amma just now, Amma gave a valid one. Okay, but there might be others who is not valid. So is that the question? Is that the fault of the instrument? You have to start thinking about that. Your questions have to be very specific, okay, and so that your respondents can give you the correct answer. Reliability, okay, again, it's related to here as well. Okay, is it consistent? Yeah. Okay lah, for height, yeah, height question is, I think it's very straightforward. Yeah, with 49, we will get 49 height answers. Okay, but reliability is, for example, if the question is ambiguous. Okay, so can you get the same height answers? Maybe not, okay, if it's not reliable. So that is the basis behind validity and reliability. You want it to be valid, you want it to be reliable. Okay, and objectivity is related to the keyword, okay, objective. So you don't want your subject to give you biased answers. Okay, this is maybe you will see this as you are developing your own instrument for those who are proceeding with that. Okay, and it's very, very important lah. Basically, these all three things. Yeah. Okay. Next. Right. So this is the metaphor. Okay. I don't know if I think this figure has been around for a very long time. Okay. So imagine you are an archer. Okay. The things is you are the one who developed the instrument. So imagine your instrument is the bow. So these are the where is that? I'm just doing very lame representation of a bow. Okay, remember this is a bow and you have an arrow. Okay, and you are there. Okay, so where the arrow lands is actually the data. Okay, so you are there, you are aiming the bow. Okay, so your bow is actually your instrument. Okay, so your instrument, okay, if it's reliable but not valid, okay, you aim and everything goes like at one specific target, okay, but it's not the target, it's not there, it's out of the target. Okay, so it's reliable because it's close together, but it's not valid. Okay, this might be some issue with the tuning or whatever. Okay, and then here, okay, it's valid, okay, because it's you know, it's dispersed in specific so if you have, I'm sorry to spring this on you, but if you have statistic, you usually have normal distribution. Okay, don't worry if you cannot keep up. I guess you guys did take some form of statistics before. Okay, but imagine whatever data that you get should be normally distributed. Okay, so in this kind of situation, it is valid, but it's not reliable because it's all the way. Okay, it should be very close to the target, okay? But it's still within the bounds. Okay, this boundary. But if it's like this, it's not reliable and it's not valid. And here is where the target is. So it's both reliable and valid. It's where it should be, and it's close together. Right? So we go next to observation. Okay, so observation is purposeful, systematic, and selective way of watching and listening to an interaction or phenomenon as it takes place. Okay, so usually observation is conducted when behavior is studied, when you're studying behavior. Okay, it's not about perception. Okay, because perception, it's hard to observe. Okay, usually when we study perception, you have to use the questionnaire. Okay? But in observation, you can observe the behavior. You can observe the behavior of people. Okay? Perhaps if you want to look at the recycling behavior, okay, of KPZ students, you can observe the people. Okay? You can observe your fellow students, okay, whether they are doing recycling or not. Okay, but can you observe perception? Cannot. Okay? So, and of course, to avoid bias, okay, your subject selection has to be very good lah, in a way. Okay, you cannot choose your subjects that are so involved with the situation that they could not be objective. They will be very biased. Okay, and then as mentioned before, we have two types: participant and non-participant. Okay, and in participant, you are involved. Okay, and you participate in the activity. In non-participant, you just observe passively. You are outside of the subjects that you study. Okay, so there are some problems with using observation as a method of data collection. Okay. We have first Hawthorne effect. Okay, Hawthorne effect is when you're observing, okay, but your subjects realize that they are being observed, so they change their behavior. Okay. So it can be affected positively or negatively, we don't know, okay, because it's changed. Yeah. For example, if, okay, again, just now with the recycling, if you tell people, okay, we are going to observe the recycling behavior of KPZ students. Okay. Some students might think, oh, I want to project a positive image, so I will do recycling every day. Okay. And you have another opposite extreme where people say, oh, I don't want to be involved in any of this. I don't want to do recycling, even though he or she actually does recycle. Okay, but because they are being observed, they change their behavior. Okay, so that affects your results. Okay, at the end of the day, you will report, okay, over a period of 10 days, I have observed the students in KPZ recycling like how much, okay, how many times, so on and so forth. But is that answer correct? Is the data correct? Okay, so that is one of the problems, Hawthorne effect. Okay, secondly is observer bias. Okay, and observer bias is actually related to the people who are doing the observation. So you yourself, or if you are working in a team and you actually have another person being the observer. Okay? So if the observer is biased, okay, and remember when we do observation, we take notes. Yeah, you can actually introduce bias into the results. Okay, and there is no way to verify the observation. Okay, because imagine just now when you're working in a team and someone else is doing the observation, you are just collecting the data, okay? And you have no idea whether that particular observations are the actual thing or the biased one. Okay, so that is observer bias. And then interpretations may vary from one observer to another. Okay, and this is a very valid problem, okay, especially when there's more than one person doing the observation. Okay, and of course, lastly, possibility of incomplete observation or recording. Okay, sometimes too many things happen at the same time. Okay, and the observer, cannot keep up, cannot make notes fast enough. Yeah. So be very careful. Okay, if you are proceeding with observation as your method of data collection, please bear this in mind. Okay, and you have to think about how you can avoid these kind of problems. Okay. So in observation, remember when I say just now, take notes. Yeah. So there are many ways to record the observation. Okay. So if it's a qualitative study, it can be narrative, okay, or it can be descriptive. Yeah. So you just basically you take notes based on what is happening. Right? But if you are doing a quantitative study, but your method of data collection is observation, okay, you need to come out with this first. Okay, before you do your observation, you already have your categorical form or numerical scale. Yeah, you have something like this one below. Okay, you actually have all of this, and as you go along, you just, let's say, so this example is basically in a school, okay, and it's basically on the education. So during class, whether so this study is about the differences between girls and boys behaviors in primary school. Okay. So you observe there, you go, you attend maybe a few classes in the primary school, and you just take note. Okay, invite each other ideas or opinions, and you just take maybe as it happens. Okay, in one class, there's 1, 2, 3, and here there's 4. Okay, and here maybe 1, here it's 2 happen as it go along. Okay, but look here is that in quantitative, you have this form already. You develop this before you do your observation. Okay, and this is in the form of categorical form. But if you have a numerical scale, it looks something like this. Okay. So it's something related to numerical scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you will choose, okay, as the situation progresses. Okay, you will choose like what is the situation happening. Okay, and you know, what makes it quantitative is that at the end of the day, you can actually sum this up. Even here, okay, on item 1, maybe girls, the average value is how many, okay, and boys, how many, okay, that makes it a quantitative study, okay, whereas if it's a qualitative study, okay, you are there, you are bringing your own notes, okay, and you take notes as it happens, okay. Right, scales, okay, if you look here, okay, we have something that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we actually call that scale. And if I'm not mistaken, we will have a look at that later on. Okay? But problems in using scales, there are a few problems as well. Okay? The first one is error of central tendency. Okay, and this we can see this actually. Even I do it myself. And sometimes when you do, when you are asked to rate something, okay, and you actually have scale of 1 to 5, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes, yeah, find it really hard to either choose 1 or 5. Okay, you would rather go, okay, maybe this 5 is too extreme, I will give 4. Maybe in some kind of situation, yeah, I don't really like this product, for example, but I don't want to give 1 because it may seem too mean, so I give 2. Okay, so that kind of situation, okay, that kind of mindset and thinking, that is called the error of central tendency. You want to avoid the extreme positions. You just focus on the central part. Okay, that's one of the problems when you are using scale. Even I do it myself sometimes. I noticed that. So in elevation, second one is elevation effect. Okay. So some observers may prefer certain sections than the other. Okay, and elevation effect is, you know, especially when, you know, when we look at this kind of example, there are many items, and there are many items. So each of the items, maybe there's 1 or 2 there, which you think is very, very hard to spot. Okay, and you mentally, you say that this is so, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay, so you look forward to specific things. Okay, and during that kind of situation, usually, okay, you will give a better rating. Okay, and with the other items, okay, you will give a bad rating. Okay, that is the elevation effect. The actual situation might not be so, but because you prefer that specific situation, you put in a higher score. Okay, so that is called the elevation. You elevate, okay, the actual situation more than it's supposed to be. Third one is halo effect. Okay, and this is also, it's natural. Okay, it happens. So when you do your observation, okay, especially if we take the previous example with school children, sometimes you have that mindset, you know, you are observing and you see this one girl, okay, she is very, very good. She answers questions all the time. Okay, so sometimes that will affect your rating. Okay, maybe she's good in the sense that she asks a lot of questions. Okay, and you did give her 5, for example, as her score. But on other items, okay, maybe she's not too good at mingling with others. Okay, but because you have this mindset, okay, she's a good student. Okay, you give also for that specific question, okay, 5. Although in fact she is not that good in the interpersonal relationship. Okay, so that happens. So you have to be very careful when we use scales, even then. So that's about observation. Okay, how about interview? Right. So interview is one of the most commonly used methods of data collection. Okay, so it can be face-to-face. It doesn't even have to be face-to-face. Okay, usually we can have phone interviews. Okay, but basically you have a specific purpose. So I have to highlight that because remember just now, we are not just talking to your friends about some random things. Yeah, you actually have a very specific thing that you're looking for. Right? So in an interview, it involves asking questions and recording the answers of the respondents. And again, it's also, there's 2 types here, unstructured and structured, as I mentioned before. Okay. Unstructured is very flexible, okay, in terms of the structure, the contents, okay, and usually this is used a lot in qualitative study, okay, because it's very flexible. However, the disadvantage lies in the high level of skill required to conduct them. Okay, you have to be very experienced interviewer. Okay. Whereas if we have structured interviews, okay, remember just now you already have the specific questions, okay, and the wording is determined, okay, it's already been validated. The sequence is also set, okay, it's not like you're going to jump from one question to another. The flow is already there. Okay. So this brings us to this one, interview schedule. So interview schedule is not the time, it's not saying we will have 10 to 10:15 interview. So that is your interview schedule. So it's not that. So interview schedule is actually the written list of questions. Okay, the one where you have developed. Okay. It can be open-ended or close-ended. Okay. And what is this? So open-ended is question where your respondents have to form their own thoughts, their own words, sorry, thoughts. And they will give you a narrative. Okay. Whereas for close-ended question, this is more like an objective question. Okay, you give them the question, but you also give them the options. Okay. The simplest one would be yes or no question. Okay, so yes or no question is a close-ended because you give a question and you ask them to answer yes or no. Whereas if it's open-ended, it's more about, you know, things where you ask, what is your opinion on ... Okay. And there can be many types of answers from that question. That makes it open-ended. All right. So basically, if you are using interview for your FYP project, okay, this is your method of data collection. Okay, and you have to come out with your interview schedule. Okay. And interview schedule is actually your instrument. Okay, and the interviewing is the method of data collection. So you have to put that into your methodology. Okay, how you develop your interview schedule, okay, what are the questions, who validated them. Yeah, so those are the steps that you have to follow if you are doing interview. Okay, and next one is questionnaire. Okay, questionnaire is a written list of questions where the answers are recorded by respondents. Okay, I'm pretty sure all of you are very familiar with questionnaire. So as mentioned before, okay, questionnaire usually you disseminated them to your respondents. You are not actually there next to them explaining what each question means. Okay? So in this type of situation, you have to make sure that the questions are clear and easy to understand. Okay. The layout as well. It has to be easy to read, has to be pleasant to the eyes. Okay, sequencing must be easy to follow. Okay, if you have ever looked at previous examples before, or you have ever done, okay, you answered a survey, you can see how the questions are developed. Okay, usually it follows a flow, a very logical flow. Okay, and you can just answer very easily. Okay, that's your aim. You should develop your questionnaire to be like that. Okay. Ways to administer questionnaire. So this is how you usually disseminate the questionnaire. I mentioned before mail questionnaire. So this used to be how it was before. Okay, before we are usually using Google Form. Okay, but back then we usually use mail questionnaire. Right, and this is the most common option before. Okay, but you need access to the address of your respondents, and you must have a covering letter, but it has the situation where it has low response rate. Okay, similar, even when you do online questionnaire, okay, sometimes you send out your questionnaire to 1,000 people, but usually you don't get 1,000 questionnaires back. Okay, you don't get 1,000 responses. You usually get less than that. Okay. So secondly is collective administration. Okay, so this is usually when you do when you join a program. Okay, at the end of the program, usually they will give out this form. Okay, they will ask you to share with them what is your thoughts. Okay, please rate this program. Okay, what do you think about so and so? Yeah, those are the types of questions. So usually that is when you attend a program. Okay, that is called a collective administration, because it's actually this one usually you get more participation. Okay, because you are actually there. Okay, and you are giving the questionnaire to them at that moment. Okay, and after maybe 5 or 10 minutes, you collect them back. Okay, and usually this is very, very effective. Of course, the third one is you are very familiar with online questionnaire. Okay, very similar to the mail questionnaire, except it's using the internet. So you can either post it on the website or you can provide the link. Yeah. And lastly is public places. Okay, public places here is, for example, if you go out, okay, perhaps to shopping malls, yeah, and you administer your questionnaire to the people who are interested to join the study. Okay. So that can be that. That can be another option, public places. Yeah, but it's dependent on the type of study, okay, dependent on the population, okay, and where they are most likely to be found. Okay, you cannot do, you have to be very critical, basically, if you are thinking about deforestation, okay, in Peninsular Malaysia. Yeah, so your respondents have to be people in the Peninsular Malaysia. Okay, what if you are in Sabah or Sarawak? Okay, do you think that that will give you a valid answer? You have to start thinking about that, right? How, who is your intended respondents? Who is your samples? Who is your subject? Okay. So to choose between interview schedule and questionnaire, okay. So because some of you might notice, even in interview schedule just now, yeah, it may be very similar to questionnaire. So you might ask, like, okay, should I do interview or should I do questionnaire? So it depends. Okay, it depends on first the nature of the investigation, right? So if it's on a sensitive issue, maybe the question that you are asking, for example, yeah, this is about drugs, for example, So you might think about your respondents might not want to reveal themselves. Okay, so in that situation, you need anonymity. So usually questionnaire is easier. Okay, because usually questionnaire, if you remember, a lot of those questionnaires, they don't ask you the name. Okay, the demographic section of the questionnaire usually asks just very general things like age, range, you know, the highest academic contribution or whatever. So it doesn't really ask you questions like how you can identify the person, the name, very specific question is not there. Okay? But there are situations where an interview is better, okay, because you might want to get in depth. Because remember, in a questionnaire, it might be too broad, yeah, sometimes. Okay? And you actually want to get more information. So you go for interview. Okay? But of course, yeah, have to bear in mind also the population. With interview, you cannot, especially if you're doing FYP, FYP is just, you only have that specific time. So you cannot spend like 1 year to interview people, okay? And that might be the situation if you are targeting a lot of people. Maybe you want to interview 100 people, okay? And that cannot be done in, let's say, 1 or 2 months. Right? So for interviews, you might have to lose the numbers, okay, make it smaller numbers, but you get more qualitative data, okay, you get more in depth, which is different if you do questionnaire. You may be able to target more people, okay, and you can get some type of data, but not in depth in specific things. Yeah? So it's something that you have to decide and you have to justify, basically. Right. The second thing is the geographical distribution. If it's scattered over wide distances, then you have to go with questionnaire. That would be the easiest option rather than, you know, the whole of Malaysia you're going to interview. Very, very ambitious, but can it be done in the specific time set? Yeah. So which is different if you are, if your population is your classmates. You can just complete that interview within 1 week, for example. That makes it different. And lastly, type of study population, the population itself. Okay. If, for example, they are illiterate, okay, they cannot read, okay, or they are very young, yeah, or they are handicapped, then it's better to proceed with interviews, okay, because in questionnaire, you might have that limitation, right? Hope that is clear. So very quickly on the types of question, okay, open-ended question versus closed questions. Okay, like mentioned before, open-ended, it's open. Okay, you ask a question and your respondent can answer anything. Which is different with closed question. You already gave them the option. Okay, the option. So you just you get the possible answers are within what you already come up with. Right? Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. Okay, I'll leave that to you to think about. Survey methods. Okay, the method is a primary data collection, and you ask your respondents, okay, either using verbal or written questioning. Okay, remember this is survey. The types of survey methods can be personal interview, or can be telephone interview, or it can be mail or internet survey. But there are many ways to do that. Okay. And if you remember, if you've watched the sampling methods, okay, there are ways where you can actually proceed with sampling. Okay, how you want to approach, how many numbers of respondents you should have. Okay, those are the things that is very relevant when we talk about the survey methods. Okay, so in a survey process, okay, you have to be very clear on your aim. Okay, what is your actual aim? And this aim of survey is actually related to your objectives. Remember when you're doing your research methodology, your research proposal, and you come up with your objectives. So your survey should be able to answer, okay, or achieve these objectives that you've already highlighted in your research proposal. Okay. And based on the aim of the survey, you can start to design your questionnaire. Okay. You can have a look here as well. You can define the question types. Is it open-ended, closed-ended? Okay, you have to organize the contents. Okay. Graphics. So graphics might not be that relevant anymore because before, when we do mail questionnaire, okay, where you have to print that out and mail that out, okay, the design, the aesthetics is very important because you want people to feel good, okay, as opposed to when it's very messy, you open it, just what is this, throw it away. Yeah, you want to avoid that kind of situation. But nowadays people are using Google Form, okay, and the aesthetics are mostly similar. Okay, you can tweak around, okay, how it looks like, right? But it's almost like a default one. Yeah, but you have to be very careful in terms of the language, okay, the flow of the questions. It has to be very, very intuitive, so that people can answer it, very easily. They don't feel like tired to answer a question. You don't want to have 10 pages. In Google Form, you can press next, 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 right? So for usually specific sections, there's a few questions, and then you can press next and you come to the next section. Okay. Imagine if you have to do that 10 times and each section has like 10 questions. Yeah, I bet you after the second one, people will just, oh, I'll probably do this later, and you won't get that feedback. Okay, so you have to be very strategic. Don't overburden your respondents. Think about you yourself. Would you want to answer this questionnaire if it was given to you? Okay, and this is very important, and it should be addressed during the pilot survey. So in pilot, usually after you have developed your questionnaire, you have a pilot study, okay, where you use that questionnaire, and perhaps you ask your friends to try answer this question. Okay, there are different levels. Okay, the next one is you target the experts themselves. Okay, but usually before that, we do the pilot first. So in pilot, you ask specific people, okay, to answer this questionnaire and highlight what are the issues. For example, okay, maybe some of your friends are not familiar with specific words. Okay, then you have to change that. So that is the pilot survey. Okay, and you revise that. You revise the questionnaire according to the feedback that you get from the pilot survey, and you get the final questionnaire. But before that, okay, I think this one, there's another one here, which is called validation. Sorry about that. Validation. So in validation, okay, you have specific experts, okay, who will validate the question. Okay, and again, it follows the same thing lah. So basically, it's here you do pilot survey and then you do validation, and after that you revise and you get the final questionnaire. Okay, so that's the flow. That's how you develop the actual questionnaire. Okay, of course, here until then you administer the questionnaire and you get your data. Okay, and finally you will analyze that. Okay, so that is a framework of sampling process which uses a survey in the form of questionnaire. Okay, so if you are doing a questionnaire, then this would be very, very helpful in terms of the framework. Okay, you have to include this in your methodology. All right. So, so these are the processes. So we'll go very quickly on the next one. So this is designing questionnaire, which is here. Designing questionnaire is very, very critical. Okay, because imagine this is your instrument. Okay, your instrument, and whatever happens, okay, it will be your instrument is the most responsible part of it. It's the most important thing. Okay, you might be a bit confused, and sometimes where can I find, like, where do I look when I want to design my questionnaire? So that's actually in the literature. Okay, people who are doing survey study, okay, they will have their own survey, their own questionnaire, and you can use that to develop your own. I'm not saying to copy and paste, okay, because the questionnaire should relate to your own objective. Okay, the previous study might aim other things. Okay, but your study should be, or maybe different than the previous one, but you can use the questionnaire that they have developed to produce your own, right? So these are some of the steps that you can use when you are developing your questionnaire design. Okay, so look, the pilot survey is definitely going to be there. Okay, because not only on the questions, which we call items, by the way, the pilot survey also usually look at the aesthetics. Okay, look at the flow, yeah, how you are presenting the questionnaire, in what form. Okay, those will be asked in the pilot survey. All right. So that is on the designing questionnaire. So the principles, okay, is the wording. Okay, you have to be very careful on the wording. Okay. Remember just now when I say certain words may not be universally known. Okay, so you have to be very careful there, right? And measurement. What actually that question measures? I have to be, you have to start thinking about that. Okay. General get up. So get up this year is actually on how it generally looks. Yeah. Then type of questions. Okay, sorry. So you can do open-ended or you can do closed-ended. Okay, it's up to you, but you have to remember if you're doing closed-ended, okay, the options that you give to your respondents must be something that you have studied or you have researched. Okay, whereas if it's open-ended, it's more related to opinions, so on and so forth. So you don't actually have to think about that. Okay, but the thing is like this: if it's open-ended, okay, it's easy to ask, but the analysis part will be quite challenging because you need to extract what are the key points that has been highlighted in the open-ended answer that you get. Okay. Whereas if it's a closed-ended, you have to work beforehand. You have to come up with the likely options. Okay. Maybe you have 5 options. Okay. Is that just come out the top of your head? Or is it something that you study? You search about in your in the references, you know, in journal papers, okay, and then you come out with the options. So the work is prior to the data collection, but then you will get the answer and you can analyze it very fast because you already get from 5 options just now. Okay, you already know option 1, 5 people chose that. Option 2, maybe 20 people. Okay, option 3, 15. So you can analyze directly. Okay, in terms of item 1, option 2 was the most popular. Why? Okay, you can directly analyze and discuss that. Right? So you can use open-ended question. You can use a mixture in one questionnaire. It can be a mixture of open-ended and closed-ended. Okay, and you can also include rating scale. Yeah. So rating scale just now is about all right. So rating scale is something where you have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, or those are scales. Okay, and next week we will look further into measurements of scale, where you have maybe some of you are familiar with things called Likert scale. Yeah, so Likert scale, we have something like that. We also have different types of scale as well. And we will learn that next week. So we can use a mixture of this in one questionnaire. That's no problem. right? And just to give you a general idea on scale, okay, usually in the measurement scale, there's 4 types. There's 4 types of measurement scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Okay, please bear this in mind. Okay, this should be in your exam question as well. Okay, and you have to know what differentiates one from the other. Okay, we'll look into that later on. I will just skip this one. This is basically when we are developing a questionnaire. Yeah, you have to know what is the missing link. Yeah? And what is missing link is it's your study. Okay, remember when I mentioned early on in the course, okay, your research should not be just about imitating something that other people had done. It has to be something there. Okay, that is your missing link. What is the one thing that separates your study from the others? Okay, and that will be apparent first, of course, in the objective. Okay, and later on that is translated into your instrument. Okay, so maybe just now you saw another study very similar to yours, okay, and you adopted the questionnaire, but there must be something different in your questionnaire that separates yours from the one that you use as a basis. Okay, and that is related to your objective, right? So very quickly on the pilot survey. So another word for pilot, okay, is also called pre-test. Okay, pre-testing a research instrument. So remember just now when you have already developed your own questionnaire, okay, you chose a group of people similar to the study population. Okay, so if the closest or the simplest example, okay, if your targeted population is students in KPZ, yeah, so you can actually use your classmates as your pilot study, you know, because one of the thing is, yeah, they are students, okay, similar similar conditions to the study population. Okay, if you want to be more specific, then you chose your classmates who are staying in KPZ. Okay, that would make it more, more realistic, more reliable, more valid. Okay. So these selected friends of yours, okay, you ask them, have a look at the questionnaire, highlight the things that you find, you know, confusing or you find very misleading, okay, so on and so forth. So if there are any problems, okay, with the wording, okay, anything, so you have to restructure, or rather you have to take that in mind, okay, and update your questionnaire accordingly, right? Stage 3, okay, just now it's still about designing. So stage 3 is administering the questionnaire. So this is more specific towards your respondents. Okay? So in the methodology, we have to define your population. Who is your population? And who is your target respondents? Okay, bearing in mind, when we say population, it's usually a more broad representative. Okay, for example, population, let's say Malaysia. Okay, Malaysia population. So this is the population, but your target respondents may be students of UPM. Okay, so notice that here it's a subset of Malaysia. Okay, because UPM by location, it is in Malaysia. So this broad representative is your population, and here is your target respondents. Okay, you have to be very clear on this one. Okay, and you have to include this in your methodology. So you also have to mention how you administer the questionnaire. Is it using Google Form? Okay, are you using interview? Okay, is it on the telephone, so on and so forth, right? So lastly, acquiring the samples. Okay, just now it's just about prior to giving out the questionnaire, okay, where you define the population and target respondents and how the process is going to proceed. But the final stage is when you actually acquire the samples. Okay, and this is again, if you look in the sampling methods video, okay, this has already been explained. Okay, what is the difference between convenient, sample, purposive, snowball? Okay, there are many ways. It cannot be just you cannot say in your methodology part, yeah, I am sending my Google form to UPM email addresses. He cannot say something like that. You have to be very specific. Which of these are you using? Is it convenient sampling, purposive sampling, snowball sample, or what? Then you have to include that in your methodology, right? Okay, so I think, do you guys want break or do you want just to proceed? It's not too much anymore. Nak break ke? Nak proceed terus?
Proceed je, Doktor.
Proceed je. Alright. Sekejap eh. Okay. Tak apalah. We can go proceed. Okay, ada yang jawab in chat proceed juga. Okay, good. So, secondary sources. Just now, it's more about you are collecting the data. Okay, but what if you are doing, if your study is using secondary sources? Okay, so of course, already mentioned this again before. Okay, what are the potential sources where you can get secondary data? Okay, and however, just to highlight here, what are the challenges? Okay, what are the challenges? So imagine if you're using something that is already published out there. Okay, how are you going to make sure that the data is valid? How reliable is it? Okay, the data. So you have to look at the sources. Okay, usually if you have something like a government publication, that data is validated. Okay, and it's very reliable because it's already published. Okay. Contrast that with something like internet blogs. Okay, sometimes I'm not saying that people are bad, okay, but there are situations where people made claims that are not true. Okay, and they just write about it. We see this in nowadays in social media. Sometimes the claims are untrue, okay, but people just say, so can you use that as your secondary source? Yeah, because you don't even know whether it's valid or not. So you have to make sure that it is a valid and reliable source. And of course, challenges again is personal bias, and maybe there are some bias. This we can see in things like politics, for example. Yeah, even newspapers. You know that specific political party has their own newspaper. Okay, and if the same news might be worded differently in different newspapers. Okay. I know that your generation, you guys read newspapers anymore. Ke baca semua online je. So that is the thing. Yeah, usually there are bias. Okay, cannot be helped. And then the availability of data. Okay, although you are using secondary sources, is the data available, or do you need to pay for it to access it? Yeah, there are different scenarios. Okay, and variations of format or scales. Okay, and this is especially true if you want to compare something apple to apple. Okay, however, this one study was done in different location at different time. Okay, and another study was done with a different population at different time. So can you actually compare? Maybe you want to compare the recycling rate in Malaysia compared to Japan. Yeah. So is it a comparable comparison? Is it apple to apple? It might not be so. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. Right. So actually we are finally finished. Saya tiba nak tanya the break ke tak kan? Because actually I want to